I think they're looking for a space where they can be comfortable, perhaps make some NIL money in the process, but be better set up long-term as opposed to it being 1 year jumping around.
You want to kind of get your core players that have been here a couple of years, and then go get the high-profile recruit and then supplement at the transfer portal.
Inside the transfer portal, only on SportsGrid.
Quotes coming out about Embiid, oh, he's a warrior. You'll never get him off the court. You're just telling me he's an injury. He's one slip and fall away from not seeing him anymore in this series.
I would have sat him because there was only 1 day between the two games. It's 2 days between games 2 and games 3, and it's 2 days between games 3 and game 4.
Betting above the rim, only on SportsGrid. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid, your 24/7 sports wagering network. The early line.
Magical and historic season in Lincoln, Nebraska continues.
He's the best player in the NBA, but also in the biggest moments where the national media is watching.
Newswire.
Something that we have never seen happen before with one of the iconic coaches in the game.
Pharrell, coast to coast.
The team covers. It's automatic. It's every time. Not sometimes. It's every time.
Game time decisions.
Luka is actually far more dangerous from 3 on the road this year than at home.
This game here tonight, you may want to consider taking as many points as humanly possible.
In-game live, prime time.
We got not 1, but 2 coaches fired systems in place.
Sports Rage Late
sort of
Night.
has letdown written all over it. It's going to be hard to match the emotion that they played with the other night.
It's smarter to be on.
It's hour number 2, live right here on the early line on this Monday to start off a new week on SportsGrid. He is Donnie right side. I am Ben Stevens. Plenty to get to here in this second hour, including our final draft takeaways. We gave you our round 1 winners and losers. Now, how about the entirety of the 7 rounds in the 2024 NFL Draft? And everything we saw this weekend, what it means for the futures of franchises around the National Football League and those rooks now taking the leap to the next level. But we start this second hour going around the diamond from this past weekend in Major League Baseball. And it was a big weekend series, interleague action between Cleveland and Atlanta. The 2 best records in all of Major League Baseball, both entering the weekend and leaving it, despite the Braves winning this weekend series and doing so in extras in the finale yesterday. 4-3 in 10 innings. Atlanta gets the series win in the Game 3 win as well. Austin Riley, game-winning RBI single in the home half of the 10th that scored Ronald Acuna Jr. The Atlanta Braves, Donnie, one of the favorites to win the World Series before the year got started. Second best price, only behind the LA Dodgers, are living up to that expectation. 19-7, the record for the Braves, the best mark in all of the bigs.
Yeah, and a lower scoring game, 7 runs there in extra innings. I was joking, the past couple of weeks of the season, like, my goodness, just bet the Atlanta Braves. It's 5+ runs every single night. Who cares on the mound for them pitching? But now they're getting good pitching and also combating clutch hitting as well. They had nothing going on here, Ben. 3-1 in this game before the 8th inning where they tied it up at 2. Scored 2 runs to make it 3-3, then 1 in extras. The Braves are really good, and I love the parity across Major League Baseball right now, because if you're looking at the standings, even in the National League, there's a couple really good baseball teams that you could probably say have their own each awards here to probably go along and say, I think we can win the World Series at this point. But the Braves certainly at the top of the heap. We expected them to be here even through injuries and not great pitching from their starters. Here they are, 19-7 and taking 2 out of 3 from the Guardians.
And when you look at the National League East at this moment, Atlanta is 19-7. The Phillies are playing some great ball right now. They've won 4 straight, 8 of their last 10. The Phils DRS 19-10. The New York Mets walk it off in extras yesterday against the Cardinals, 4-2 in 11 innings. The Amazons a game above 500 as well. So 3 teams out of the National League East that we all expect to contend for playoff spots, living up to that expectation at least to begin this Major League Baseball season. So that stayed under yesterday in Atlanta, even in extras. We had 2 games this weekend at altitude, not in Coors Field, but in Mexico City, between the Rockies and the Houston Astros. And the Astros take both of the games in Mexico City against the Rocks. And frankly, Houston needed it at this time. 8-2 the victory for the Astros yesterday against the Rockies. Both totals for these 2 games in Mexico City at 16, and both stayed under. Houston won 12-4 on Saturday. That game had a total pregame of 16.5. They win. Game stays under. 16 was the total yesterday. The Astros win 8-2.
Yeah, and also Valdez back on the mound. Good performance. 5 innings pitched, 5 hits, 2 earned runs. Like, hey, that's average. No, that's really good in the environment that they played in because the ball absolutely travels in Mexico City. But a good performance by the Astros against the lowly Rockies. And years ago, like when I have RBI props, right? I say, why are you just loading up on RBI props in the series? I actually bet one on Sunday here, and it was Diaz. Diaz was batting, I think, in the 6 or 7 hole yesterday, and was a minus 140 to get an RBI. I said, no, that's not. Like nobody's at minus 140. Everybody's at like plus 140 or higher. So it just goes to show you how many runs we were expecting in this game. And the Astros had played 8. And also, I didn't get that Diaz RBI, I believe, until the 8th inning on a 2-out double. So thank goodness that finally came in at a minus 140 price. But some of those games are fun at elevation. It catches you off guard. Like 16.5, where did that come from? And they almost got it.
Yeah. Yeah, a couple of other big games last night. Sunday Night Baseball out in Fenway. The Red Sox, a 5-4 victory over the Chicago Cubs, walking it off. A blooper into shallow left off the glove of Chicago's shortstop, Dansby Swanson, gives the victory to the Sox and the series victory as well. And Donnie, Boston right now, some elite starting pitching. Tanner Hoke yesterday, 4 Boston, 6 2/3, only 1 earned run allowed, struck out 9. He's got a 1.60 ERA. Cutter Crawford off to a great start for Boston as well. The Red Sox, 3 games above 500, 16-13 in the American League East.
Yeah, sometimes you think about guys getting lucky. If you watch Tanner Houck actually pitch, he is a really good pitcher. He's got movement on his slider. I'm really impressed early season. And this is something that we were looking at the Boston Red Sox where they were supposed to be dead last in the American League East. Now, granted, again, we're about a month into the season. Are we expecting Tanner Houck to be the Cy Young Award winner? Probably not. And he will have his rough starts. It's a small ballpark. It's going to heat up. Let's see what happens. But 16-13 for the Red Sox through 29 games, they'll take that here because we expected them to just be driving that basement bus all throughout the summer. And here they are playing good baseball.
Third best record right now in the American League East behind the Baltimore Orioles at 17-10. The Yankees win the series against the Milwaukee Brewers in Milwaukee. 15 runs yesterday for the Bombers against the Brew Crew. New York puts up 15 in a 15-5 victory over Milwaukee. Aaron Judge got it started, a 441-foot home run in the top of the first for New York.
Yeah, and also you're waiting for some of these guys to wake up, and that's not really like they weren't playing in elevation. They weren't playing in a great hitter's ballpark and putting up monstrous numbers. We're waiting for the Yankees here to turn it on at 19-10. That is a great first month here, and also talking about the preseason projections where we expected them to be great, not getting a lot of great starts here early in the season. Top flight starting pitching, not providing an. So still waiting, like Judge, he's only hitting 211 here on the season. Let's see that winter, winter weather move out and finally, Ben, 80 degrees here in the Northeast. We're finally seeing that shift. Woo! We might be seeing an all-time performance up in the Bronx this year, man. I can't wait to see when that's 85 to 90-degree weather in that small ballpark and Stanton is clicking and Judge is clicking and Soto's clicking, man. We're going to have some good times with some RBI props for sure there.
The Dodgers take 2 of 3 against the Blue Jays up in the Great White North, but Toronto did win the series finale yesterday to avoid the sweep. Now let's look around Major League Baseball where things stack up from the World Series odds. The Dodgers and the Braves still in front of the pack, plus 360 for LA. Atlanta has the best record in the bigs at plus 470, just over $1 behind the Dodgers, but the Yankees are keeping things close at 6 to 1. The price 19-10. The record for the Pinstripes, second best in all the American League, only behind the Guardians, and the Orioles fourth best price at 11-1. But you can see the big three, at least from the odds makers' perspective, that we see right now. The three teams with three digits in their World Series numbers: Dodgers, Braves, Yankees, in that order.
Yeah, and by the way, I'm taking a look at the National League here. You got some big boys up top. You talk about the big three in Major League Baseball. How about the big three in the NL? That's the Atlanta Braves, the Philadelphia Phillies, and the Los Angeles Dodgers. Dodgers aren't playing particularly unbelievable baseball based on the type of talent they have, but still 18-12, and they're benefiting now from a division that isn't playing great baseball either. Everybody in their division is under 500 here, so that's good for the Dodgers. But you, as you said to start off the telecast here, Braves, Phillies, and Mets all over 500, playing some good baseball here. And also, that was a Mets team that started off basically like, oh no, this might be a disastrous season. We're still waiting for Francisco Lindor to absolutely light it up. Pete Alonso, the polar bear, to go yard. But I like what I'm seeing here early in the season. There's a lot of parity across baseball here. Outside of some teams that just can't win many baseball games, you look at the leaderboards here in each one of these divisions, they're really good baseball teams.
When you look at the American League West, nobody playing great baseball. As we shared, the Astros snapped a 5-game skid, winning both of the games in the Mexico City series against the Colorado Rockies, but they're still 9-19. Is there value on the Stros as May approaches this week at 14-1? I'm not so sure. Only two teams in that division, Seattle and Texas, above 500. The M's 2 games above 500. Texas a game above 500. NFL draft conversations from the weekend that was out in the Motor City. Up next.
To the 2024 Stanley Cup odds, the Hurricanes remain the favorite, followed by the Panthers and the Rangers. Interesting that they all are coming from the similar side of the bracket.
While the Oilers have the top-end talent, I still don't think they have enough depth, and Stuart Skinner does not scare me in depth. So I would say a long series from the Oilers and the Kings, and ultimately I think the Stars are the ones coming out of the West for the Stanley Cup.
The early line, only on SportsGrid.
DraftKings making a progressive move, I think, that most other companies are also going to do or have done in the past. Adding someone from the government or someone you would say in legislation to become their responsible gaming leader here. And in this case, her name is Lori Kalani.
And it'll be interesting to see if other companies try to follow suit in terms of hiring former lobbyists to head responsible gaming.
Newswire, only on SportsGrid.
Game Time had 35 in the first half, Cam. And then, of course, he did not have another point the rest of the game.
Lillard's, if it's playoff game time, this guy will show up. He will hit shots. Indiana, you better respond here because I'll tell you, that's a bad, bad, bad loss. We were wrong, Carver. Like, hey, I admit, I was on the Pelicans. This game, I lost.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
So Donnie and I were live in studio together on Friday following the opening night in round number 1 of the 2024 NFL Draft. We gave you our reactions, some of the confounding surprises that we saw, like the Falcons drafting 8th overall, the Buffalo Bills moving out of the first round to only select a wide receiver to start off round number 2. We'll talk about that, though, in just a little bit, and some of the best moves that we saw on the opening night. From round number 1, we give you the final 6 rounds and our takeaways from the weekend that was in Detroit. But before we get to the actual selections that were made, a shout out to the city of Detroit. The Motor City coming through in a big way, shattering a record for the most fans to ever attend an NFL draft. 775,000, well through the previous record that was just north of 300K. They doubled it and then some in Detroit. Absolute fervor for a great weekend around the NFL draft.
Yeah, shout out to Lions fans who are never going to win a Super Bowl, so you might as well party and celebrate somehow here to sit out there with the fans and watch the picks and sometimes yell Dallas sucks. It was a good weekend overall. I enjoyed it.
Wow. Okay, I did not expect some slander of the Lions organization. 4th best price, by the way, to win a Super Bowl this upcoming year. But all right, anyway, we'll save that for a later discussion. Of course, Donnie, the focus always in the NFL, whether it's a game, whether it's the offseason, whether it's the draft, is on the quarterback position. A historic opening night. 6 QBs taken in the first round. That was a record for the most in modern draft history, dating back to 1997. All 6 of the QBs selected in the first 12 selections of the 2024 NFL Draft. But then it took a while to see the next quarterback off the board. It was the guy we expected to potentially be the 7th QB selected. That was Spencer Rattler out of South Carolina. But not until day number 3 in round number 5, pick number 150 overall, a record as well, 137 picks separating quarterback selections. Bo Nix, number 12 overall in the opening round by Denver. Spencer Rattler, 150 overall by the New Orleans Saints in round number 5.
How wild is that? 6 quarterbacks go. Forget about 6 quarterbacks spent in the first round. 6 went in the top 12 picks. And then for the remaining parts of the first round, all the way through the 7th round, you only got 5 more quarterbacks. It's the most important position in sports. Usually teams will load up here, but rightfully so. Williams, Daniels, May, Penix Jr., McCarthy, and Nix, all looked at as capable guys that can start and lead an NFL franchise, right? Then we get down to the 5th round. Like Spencer Rattler was one of those guys getting a lot of hype entering into college football. Didn't really pan out. Had a great Senior Bowl. Maybe it's worth the flyer. Jordan Travis was a solid quarterback for Florida State, but his season and his team got upended late with his injury. Joe Milton III has an unbelievable arm, but where is he going to go? Devin Leary was one of those quarterbacks, Ben, probably for a couple years. You probably would have thought might have had one of those 1st, 2nd, or 3rd round grades here. But things didn't work out. He ends up transferring out and winds up in Kentucky. And then Pratt, an exciting quarterback from Tulane. So I agree with this. I love the talent in the first round. Everybody else, really just cannon fodder, I guess, here in the set up the third, scout teams and all that stuff. But that's the way it is in the NFL.
Yeah, I agree. And that's really kind of where things are from the quarterback position after the first 6 that we saw. Again, we all predicted, and we thought, Donnie, there was a chance that we would see 6 quarterbacks in the opening round, and it was the 6 guys. Did we expect all 6 to go in the top 12? Did we expect the Falcons to take a quarterback at 8th overall? Certainly not, but that's what we saw, thus the large drop-off with no QBs on night number 2 and not another quarterback until Spencer Rattler on day number 3. Sam Hartman, a name well known in college football, signed as an undrafted free agent with the Washington Commanders. Now, for Spencer Rattler, a guy that has been in the spotlight for a very long time, was on the Netflix series QB1 as a high school player back in Arizona before he even got to Oklahoma. He did not look great in the Netflix series, at least from an attitude perspective, but he was 17 years old. As NFL Network's Ian Rappaport reported on Saturday, that was in the mind of NFL organizations. How some people evaluate the draft will always blow my mind. How you look at a 17-year-old in high school with cameras following him around when he's the number one quarterback recruit and has only been told that he walks on water, and that's your draft evaluation 6 years later, boggles the mind. Spencer Rattler has talent. I think it's a great pick by the New Orleans Saints, and maybe he becomes something in the National Football League. We shall see. Love Joe Milton going to the Patriots, a rocket arm, but not much else besides that. The Patriots select 2 quarterbacks in the NFL draft. Now to the running backs. It was a big year in 2023. We saw 2 guys in the top 12. Bijan Robinson to Atlanta. Jahmyr Gibbs, of course, 12th overall to Detroit. No first-round selections at the running back spot this year. First running back off the board, Jonathan Brooks, 46th overall in round number 2 to the Carolina Panthers. He was heavily favored, minus 155 to be that first running back selected.
Yeah, you had a lot of accomplished guys here at the running back position. And yes, you do need running backs in the NFL. We had an unbelievable all-season of a lot of guys signing for some pretty good money around the league. But we didn't have that one guy that you circled that said could be a game changer. And quite frankly, last year's draft, we had 2 game changers at the top of the draft they're going. So sometimes you're going to have very good players coming out, maybe an average market, but not to say these teams can't help. And also, Jonathan Brooks is a really player. I like that move for the Carolina Panthers. You can't have enough weapons to surround your young quarterback here, and I like that move there. Trey Benson was great for Florida State. Blake Corum, no surprise here, goes on the West Coast. Maybe the surprise in the same team here, in the city, in the same team where we thought he might be a Charger, but winds up with the Rams at that point. A lot of good stuff all the way through. By the way, going all the way down to the 5th round, Audric Estime out of Notre Dame that goes to the Denver Broncos. I really liked him last year, but I know a lot of people get caught up. Hey, man, did you see the 40 time? I think that guy's going to be a pretty good player in the NFL. I do.
Completely agree. Blake Corum actually had a price to be drafted by the Chargers and reunite with his former head coach, Jim Harbaugh, who did select 2 Michigan players, by the way, in the 2024 NFL draft. Corum ends up in Los Angeles just with the other organization, that being the Rams, in round number 3. We'll look at the wide receiver spot and what we saw the rest of the weekend. Buffalo, we got to have a conversation. We'll do it up next, live right here on the Early Line.
The 2024 Stanley Cup odds, the Hurricanes remain the favorite, followed by the Panthers and the Rangers. Interesting that they all are coming from the similar side of the bracket.
While the Oilers have the top-end talent, I still don't think they have enough depth, and Stuart Skinner does not scare me in depth. So I will take a long series from the Oilers and the Kings, and ultimately I think the Stars are the ones coming out of the West for the Stanley Cup.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
DraftKings making a progressive move, I think, that most other companies are also going to do or have done in the past. Adding someone from the government or someone you would say in legislation to become their responsible gaming leader here. And in this case, her name is Lori Kalani.
And it'll be interesting to see if other companies try to follow suit in terms of hiring former lobbyists to head responsible gaming.
Newswire, only on SportsGrid.
Game Time had 35 in the first half, Cam. And then, of course, he did not have another point the rest of the game.
Lillard's, it's playoff game time. This guy will show up. He will hit shots. Indiana, you better respond here because I'll tell you, that's a bad, bad, bad loss. We were wrong, Carver. Like, hey, I admit, I was on the Pelicans. This game, I lost.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
Let's talk wide receivers from the weekend that was in the 2024 NFL Draft. After night number one, where we saw 7 wideouts go in the opening round, and that was unexpected. 6.5 was the draft prop, and the under had the hefty juice. We saw a ton of wideouts from there on out. And early in round number 2, including the Buffalo Bills, who traded out of both of their draft spots in the first round. First with Kansas City. Xavier Worthy then goes to Kansas City, and then out of number 32 overall as the Carolina Panthers come up and get Xavier Legette. We thought, Donnie, on Friday, maybe this was posturing by Brandon Beane and the Bills organization to use the 24 hours to inquire about Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, maybe T. Higgins. No trade materializes. Buffalo remains at 33rd overall and selects Keon Coleman, who is a big play wide receiver, gave a great introductory press conference up in Western New York, but has a couple of questions. Buffalo was minus 370 to draft a wide receiver, was their first pick of the 2024 NFL Draft. So they cashed that ticket. But the fact Buffalo only takes one wide receiver, and I would have set the prop at 2.5 and juiced the over, kind of baffles the mind for all Buffalo had to do to restore that wide receiver room and keep their most prized possession in Josh Allen happy this offseason.
Yes, I like the move for Keon Coleman. I think he's a quality wide receiver. You know what I would have really liked that move, Ben? If Stephon Diggs was still the number 1 wide receiver on that team and you add him, Keon Coleman, to the mix at this point. You're looking for a team that's in the strike zone with a talented quarterback that you're supposed to surround him with as much talent as you can to try to win a championship. That's usually the goal here. I think we're looking for a step back here for the Buffalo Bills. Now, are we saying miss the playoffs? No, because they're still a playoff team. But let's just move forward and say, okay, we're in the playoffs here. Who is that dominant number 1 going to be for us to step up? Now, granted, you might say, well, Donnie, Stephon Diggs is that guy. Did you see him dropping passes when they really needed him to make some big catches in the playoffs? Look, I understand that as well. I like the pick for the Buffalo Bills, but it doesn't move the needle that goes, okay, they replaced their number 1 wide receiver now. It's hard to do that with a rookie, and a rookie that was drafted in the second round. If it was Marvin Harrison Jr., they traded up together. Like, okay, now we might be cooking right now. Nice pick in Keon Coleman, but doesn't move the needle for me, Ben.
Absolutely so. The Chargers and the Patriots make a small trade to start off the second round. LA moves up to get Ladd McConkey out of Georgia. Big move there. First round grade. Some back issues maybe had him fall into the second round. The Patriots used their second pick after drafting Drake May in the first round, 3rd overall, to get him some weapons. Jalen Polk out of Washington. You saw Jalen McMillan on that board as well. All 3 of Washington's studs at the wide receiver position this past year in college football go in the top 100. Polk at 37 overall, Jalen McMillan 92nd overall, and of course Rome Odunze 9th overall to the Chicago Bears. A.D. Mitchell on his slide slightly goes to Indianapolis at 52nd overall, and Jermaine Burton 3rd round pick 80 to the Cincinnati Bengals. Let's look at the defensive side of the football. 2 defensive guys out of the Big Ten, Donnie, that I cannot believe were in the second round, but because of it, steals. 36th overall. Washington takes Johnny Newton out of Illinois, interior defensive lineman. A great pick by Washington. And your guy, my guy, Philly's guy, Cooper DeJean, 40th overall, round number 2 to the Philadelphia Eagles. I think maybe the best pick in the draft.
You're taking a look also, like it's very rare that you come away from a draft and say, okay, we got our needs here and they're going to provide. But the Philadelphia Eagles needed cornerbacks here in the worst way. Not to say that Darius Slay isn't a very good cornerback still. To this day, he is. But you basically get 2 of the best 3, and some people saying 2 of the best corners in the draft, and you didn't have to trade up basically to get that first round pick, which was fantastic. You make the move to get Cooper DeJean, but also let's take a look at the ramifications here. In the NFL this season, Ben, special teams is going to come back in a big way, which means punt returning has always been there. We get it. But kickoffs, you never had to draft a kick returner. Like, we never thought we would see another Devin Hester again. I'm not calling Cooper DeJean Devin Hester, but hear me out. The impact of the kick returner was diminished over the past 5 to 6 years. It's back. We're looking at now, Ben, 90% of the kickoffs now are going to equate into kickoff returns. And if you have an elite returner and also an elite defensive back in that same pick in the second round, that is awesome here. So that's a great pick for the Philadelphia Eagles, killing 2 birds with 1 stone right there. That's awesome.
And they did not have to move to get either. They move up slightly to get Cooper to Gene at 40 overall, but with where he fell into the second round, Howie Roseman had himself a weekend, and we'll talk draft weekend winners and losers on the other side, and a couple of other things to highlight as well. It's a draft discussion here in this second hour of the Early Line on a Monday. More continues next.
The 2024 Stanley Cup odds, the Hurricanes remain the favorite, followed by the Panthers and the Rangers. Interesting that they all are coming from the similar side of the bracket.
While the Oilers have the top-end talent, I still don't think they have enough depth, and Stuart Skinner does not scare me in net. So I will take a long series from the Oilers and the Kings, and ultimately I think the Stars are the ones coming out of the West for the Stanley Cup.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
DraftKings making a progressive move, I think, that most other companies are also going to do or have done in the past. Adding someone from the government or someone you would say in legislation to become their responsible gaming leader here. And in this case, her name is Lori Kalani.
And it'll be interesting to see if other companies try to follow suit in terms of hiring former lobbyists to head responsible gaming.
Newswire, only on SportsGrid.
Game Time had 35 in the first half, Cam. And then, of course, he did not have another point the rest of the game.
Lillard's, it's playoff game time. This guy will show up. He will hit shots. Indiana, you better respond here because I'll tell you, that's a bad loss. We were wrong, Carver. Like, hey, I admit, I was on the Pelicans. This game, I lost.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
Special teams, special players, special plays. As a man by the name of Sketch, I'm sure Donnie gets that joke and that reference would understand as well. And as Sketch would say, we saw some special players from the special teams perspective drafted in 2024. Shout out to the guy, Tory Taylor, the 2023 Ray Guy Award winner out of Iowa for the best punter in college football, is the earliest a punter has been drafted in the NFL since 2019. The second earliest we have seen a punter go in the NFL draft since 2012. The Chicago Bears, my winner of the NFL draft, as we'll get to in just a moment. And shout out to the early line as well. You come on to the early line, it bumps up your draft stock. Donnie, we had 3 guys on TEL, all hosted by you. Weirdly, I wasn't here for any of these days as these NFL draft prospects came on, so maybe it's the Donnie right side bump. But the big hog Molly's first out of Wisconsin. Tanner Bordolini goes in the 4th round to the Indianapolis Colts. Ladarius Henderson, one of 13 Michigan players drafted in the 2024 NFL draft, the most for any college football program this year. He goes in the 7th round to the Texans. And Austin McNamara, the punter out of Texas Tech, not drafted, but signs quickly as an undrafted free agent with the Cincinnati Bengals. It is proven. You come onto the early line and you have a bright NFL future ahead.
Exactly. And all three of those guys, well represented on the air, had a lot of fun talking to those guys, asking them about the draft process, where it was going to take them through. And I'm pretty sure all of those guys are happy landing NFL jobs. Now, as always, it's much, much harder for a punter to land an NFL job directly through the draft than it would be for solid offensive linemen and national championship offensive linemen that we saw there with Bertolini and also Henderson. But McNamara is a big kid, man, with a big leg, and we'll see if he can do some damage there for the Bengals.
Absolutely so. So maybe he does factor in to what they do on special teams. So, Donnie, now we get to the NFL draft winners and losers. We're going to go with my winners and losers first, and then your winners and losers in this next segment. So I'll just dive right in. Speaking of special teams, we go to the Chicago Bears. They are my number one winner of this weekend, not only because they get the generational talent that is Caleb Williams with the first overall pick, but they didn't have to do anything for that. Every other decision they made, only 4 draft picks outside of Caleb Williams in the final 6 rounds that we saw, and including in round number 1, I thought were sensational. Don't have to move. Rome Odunze falls to number 9. In day number 2, they get some offensive line help. Karan out of Yale. And by the way, he's a guy from Hinsdale. That's a Chicago suburb. He is a project, but he is a Bears fan, a lifelong Bears fan. There's passion in terms of that fan base. Torrey Taylor, who they actually needed some help in terms of their punting unit. He is going to be great for Chicago. And then elsewhere in round number 5, Austin Booker out of Kansas, who left maybe just a little bit early out of Lawrence. But Donnie, had he stayed, I think he would have been a day 2, maybe a day 1 pick in 2025. Chicago made the most of those 5 selections. A sensational draft.
Yeah, and also, you can just take a look at the top 2. Like, drafting number 1, you could say they won draft day because of the sensational draft they had the year before by getting that number 1 pick and taking a look at something. Yeah, it's probably a good chance that the Carolina Panthers might be bad next year, and they were. That's a home run in itself. But also, staying at that 9 pick here and getting Rome Odunze was awesome because, quite frankly, I do believe that the Chicago Bears had a game plan that said, if Odunze is on the board, we're taking him here. Maybe we'll look to work the phones and maybe trade up and use some draft capital if we want one of those superstar players. But I do firmly believe if Odunze is not on the board, that they probably trade back and gain assets and look to fortify their team across the board. But the fact that we got a bozo pick in number 8 here from the Atlanta Falcons, that's the reason why I do believe also it's a great pick to have the Bears as the winner. So if we're looking for more winners on draft weekend for you, number 2 is who, Ben?
I would go with the Philadelphia Eagles, Donnie. And I know you'll break down why we're going to talk about Philly in just a little bit. But the fact their biggest positional need probably was cornerback, and they get Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean with their 2 picks in the top 40. Did not have to trade up for Quinyon Mitchell. A little bit of brokering by Howie Roseman in the 2nd round to get Cooper DeJean. What a job Howie Roseman did, and what a return for Philadelphia to address probably their biggest positional need in this offseason and get 2 outstanding corners. I think Quinyon Mitchell is the best corner in this draft class, close behind Terrion Arnold. But then with all that Cooper DeJean can do, what a pick it was by Philly. They made 9 trades, a record for a single NFL draft, did Howie Roseman and that Birds front office. And because of the 9 trades, they also get 9 picks for next year. Some sensational front office maneuvering. We'll get your take on Philadelphia, your team, when we get to your winners and losers as well. Then I go to another team in the Commonwealth. The Pittsburgh Steelers need to protect up front. They have not been great on the O-line the past few seasons. They have Russell Wilson and Justin Fields, 2 guys that were sacked a ton on their respective teams the past 2 years. Russ in 2022 with the Broncos, Justin Fields a season ago in Chicago. And they address what they needed to up front. First round selection for the Pittsburgh Steelers, Troy Fautanu out of Washington, and then a guy in Zach Frazier, who's an absolute dog along the interior of the O-line in night number 2. They get a linebacker out of Patrick Wilson, who was the best in college football a year ago. Some health concerns for the veteran, why he fell later into the draft, but I think a guy that will pay immediate dividends in Pittsburgh. I thought the Steelers had a great draft.
Yeah, and so did I. And you get back to, you even saw some of the older Steelers commenting, say, this feels like an old school Steeler lineup that you're giving us. Really productive linebackers, maulers on the offensive line. That's how you win. I agree. I think the Steelers had a very good draft in a very competitive AFC North. But as we always say, it's really hard to do this. You're supposed to be easily picking winners out, Ben, which, again, you probably didn't spend too much time like, man, I can't find 3 winners in the draft. It's easy because you're usually drafting really talented players, and it's like, oh, I expect this kid to be good. Now, granted, in 2 or 3 years, how good is that kid going to be? We'll find out. But it's supposed to be hard to find losers here. It's not supposed to be easy. Like, wow, everybody had some good drafts here. But it was easy to find 3 for us, Ben. Let's tee you up. Loser number 1 in the NFL draft for you this weekend. Who was it?
It's still the Atlanta Falcons. When you spend what is the most valuable draft asset you have, a first-round pick, a top 10 pick on a quarterback with the investment made into Kirk Cousins, you are going to be the number 1 loser. And although the acquisition of Kirk Cousins and bolstering up the offense around him made the Atlanta Falcons the odds-on favorite to win the NFC South, if there's going to be anything more than that, Atlanta still needed to fill a lot of holes. So you use that first-round pick, 8th overall, on a position you did not need. And then again, Terry Fontenot, who is the general manager for Atlanta, when asked why the Falcons did not take a cornerback in this draft, he said, you're right, it was a position we needed, but did not want to be too aggressive. Every explanation they gave to why they made the draft decisions they did, nonsensical. And then I added the Cowboys and the Bills, Donnie, because Dallas, although they signed Ezekiel Elliott this morning, needed a running back. They don't draft a running back at all. The Bills needed a wide receiver. They make some peculiar moves to fall out of the first round and get Keon Coleman, And when they draft Keon Coleman, they make no move for another wide receiver, and they don't draft another wide receiver outside of Keon Coleman. Donnie, I would have set the draft position prop at just total wide receivers for Buffalo at 2.5, and the over would have had the juice, and they take 1. And it was a very interesting position, despite the personality and athleticism that Keon Coleman presents. I don't understand what Buffalo did in this draft. We'll get your draft weekend winners and losers on the other side of the break here on this Monday morning on the Early Line on SportsGrid. Up next.
The 2024 Stanley Cup odds, the Hurricanes remain the favorite, followed by the Panthers and the Rangers. Interesting that they all are coming from the similar side of the bracket.
While the Oilers have top-end talent, I still don't think they have enough depth, and Stuart Skinner does not scare me in depth. So I would say a long series from the Oilers and the Kings, and ultimately I think the Stars are the ones coming out of the West for the Stanley Cup.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
DraftKings making a progressive move, I think, that most other companies are also going to do or have done in the past. Adding someone from the government or someone you would say in legislation to become their responsible gaming leader here. And in this case, her name is Lori Kalani.
And it'll be interesting to see if other companies try to follow suit in terms of hiring former lobbyists to head responsible gaming.
Newswire, only on SportsGrid.
Game Time had 35 in the first half, Cam. And then, of course, he did not have another point the rest of the game.
Lillard's, it's playoff game time. This guy will show up. He will hit shots. Indiana, you better respond here because I'll tell you, that's a bad, bad, bad loss. We were wrong, Carver. Like, hey, I admit, I was on the Pelicans. This game, I lost.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
Draft winners and losers from the weekend that was in Detroit in the 2024 NFL Draft now in the books, all 7 rounds. I gave you my winners and losers before the break. Now time for Donnie Right Sides, and we agree on that number 1 winner, but I look forward to your explanation, Donnie. Philly is your team, and the Eagles and Howie Roseman had themselves one hell of a 2024 NFL Draft.
And also, we're taking a look, and I do think the Eagles are the top overall winner, not just because, it's my team here. It's just what makes sense. You take a look at the Philadelphia Eagles, strong on the offensive line, strong at wide receiver, at quarterback, at running back. And also, you're saying the one need for the Eagles was probably getting some linebackers in here. They draft, obviously, Jeremiah Trotter Jr. late in the draft, which might be more sentimental value than actually on-the-field value in this upcoming season.
Right.
But you add on in the offseason, you're already getting a couple linebackers in there, including Devin White. The question mark came up, not so much at safety position, which you signed CJ as an off-season acquisition to come back to the Philadelphia Eagles after he was so successful on that Super Bowl run. It was always the cornerback position. And Darius Slay is still going to be a quality NFL cornerback over the next year. But what did you do? You're bringing Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean with your first 2 picks here. There are 2 guys that you can look at that you can plug and play and be starters here. So now you're looking at maybe a positive as opposed to a net negative after drafting 2 rookies here.
Yeah.
Usually you're hoping to get one of those guys and they might work out. Like Mitchell should be able to be a plug and play on the opposite side of Slay immediately. And then if you want to work in Cooper DeJean at the safety position or maybe at the nickel cornerback spot, or if somebody goes down, he can come in and play right away. But also taking a look at Cooper DeJean now, you have to take a look at what's going to happen in the NFL special teams market now. And DeJean is one of the best returners in college football that now is going to be in the mix for punt returns and also kick returns. And if you're saying, well, Donnie, kick returns don't mean much here. If you're not paying attention, the rules have been changed. We're now going to look at just about every single kickoff being returned, which is massive. If you have a guy that's used to being a game breaker there and also can play in quarterback, because Ben, you're not saying, well, we drafted him more to be the return and we'll see what happens at cornerback. Like, no, it's role reversal. He's an unbelievable returner, but an even better cornerback on that spot. You get Will Shipley in the 4th round here to back up Saquon Barkley as a power runner and a guy that can catch the football out of the backfield. I think things worked out really well. And keep an eye on this move. 6th round pick. Johnny Wilson out of Florida State. He is a giant. If you watch him this year, throw it up in the air one-on-one, he's your guy. But he probably won't even make it to being a wide receiver. You put some weight on that kid and put him at tight end and flex him out, that could be a red zone weapon. I liked up and down what the Philadelphia Eagles did in this draft, no question. By the way, Smith out of Texas A&M, another explosive guy in the open field. So how about this? Playmakers for the Birds here in the draft. I really like what I saw here, Ben.
Listen, Aeneas Smith, a speedster, had a tumultuous college career. Johnny Wilson, out of my high school. Shout out Calabasas football. I was a member of the Calabasas football program. Johnny Wilson, much more successful in what he did on the gridiron. And let's not mince words here about Cooper DeJean. He is a sensational returner. Some have looked at him, and I'll keep it at that, and said he is going to play safety. No, he is a sensational shutdown cornerback on passes attempted his way this past year. Lockdown, the completion percentage on those passes, less than 46%. He gave up 0 touchdowns in nearly 400 defensive snaps a year ago for Iowa. He had 2 interceptions. He had 5 the year before, 3 of which that he took back to the house. That's a single season record for the Hawks. That's a career record, and he did so in 1 season, and it's part of what he can do with the football in his hands. He is a playmaker, a game-winning punt return touchdown in the final 90 seconds against Michigan State this college football season. And depending on who you ask, in Iowa City or maybe the Twin Cities of Minneapolis, should have had another one in Ballard signal be damned. It wasn't a fair catch for Cooper DeJean, is what they would say in Iowa, for what would have been his second game-winning punt return touchdown. He is going to add so much to Philadelphia. Loved what Howie Roseman and the Birds did this weekend. Take us through your final two winners, DRS, from the 2024 NFL Draft.
By the way, looking at the Los Angeles Rams, and it's very rare that we're grading them in a respective spot here, Ben.
Yeah.
You could say, like, oh, look, they won the draft because they never have any draft picks in the draft. But you're telling me we get two starters with our first two picks in Verse and Fisk and only have to scout one university, and that was Florida State. And if you watch two of those guys, Verse is one of those guys that he just might be the best overall defensive player by far in the draft when it's all said and done. Fisk at 2, you also get Corum at number 3. So a guy that can be a plug-and-play starter, and then Cam Kitchens out of the University of Miami, Ben. I really like that move overall. And also, sliding it down the list here, take a look at some of those guys that you can always have those big kickers here. You get Cardi out of Stanford here. I liked what I saw here out of the Rams overall, no question about it. Now, if we're taking a look back over to the NFC, the Washington Commanders, who basically signed a brand new football team, Ben, over the offseason. Pretty impressive for them. I like the moves they made, but also Jaden Daniels, you got your superstar talent front-end quarterback that should be able to plug-and-play guy from day number one and the excitement he will bring to the Commanders. You take a look at the big defensive tackle at Illinois. This is one of those teams that was built over the years on the defensive line, traded a couple picks away. You want to restack that defensive line, and they did that. St. Trussell out of Michigan, a really good cornerback up and down this line. Then Luke McCaffrey, the wide receiver out of Rice, that converted quarterback that can do some dynamic things. I loved the offseason for Washington and the draft from Washington. This is a team that you need to pay attention to. And if Daniels plays well, probably makes the playoffs, Ben. How about that?
I love the pick of Mikey Sainristil. I already told you why I like Johnny Newton, who I think is the best interior defensive lineman of this draft class and will be a multiple-time all-pro type player for Washington. Mikey Sainristil can do it all and is a leader to the nth degree. What a good draft for the Commanders. We'll get your losers on the other side of the break as well, and we'll take a look at the odds for these rookies, DRS, in terms of what they are going to do in their rookie campaign. I do want to quickly shout out the Kansas City Chiefs as well. Thought they had a great draft because of the trade in the opening round to get Xavier Worthy, and then Kingsley Suama Tia, if I got his name correctly. I'll learn it throughout these years. But the big offensive tackle out of BYU, Kansas City addressed its couple of needs and did not have to do much. A really good draft for KC. And Donnie, when you win 2 Super Bowls in a row and you can add on positions of value and need, you are only making your organization better. A big draft for Kansas City. But who had a bad draft? Donnie will tell you up next. You're on the early line.
To the 2024 Stanley Cup odds, the Hurricanes remain the favorite, followed by the Panthers and the Rangers. Interesting that they all are coming from the similar side of the bracket.
The Oilers have the top-end talent. I still don't think they have enough depth, and Stuart Skinner does not scare me in depth. So I would say a long series from the Oilers and the Kings, and ultimately I think the Stars are the ones coming out of the West for the Stanley Cup.
The early line, only on SportsGrid.
Making a progressive move, I think, that most other companies are also going to do or have done in the past. Adding someone from the government or someone you would say in legislation to become their responsible gaming leader here. And in this case, her name is Lori Kalani.
And it'll be interesting to see if other companies try to follow suit in terms of hiring former lobbyists to head responsible gaming.
Newswire, only on SportsGrid.
Game Time had 35 in the first half, Cam. And then, of course, he did not have another point the rest of the game.
Lillard, it's playoff game time. This guy will show up. He will hit shots. Indiana, you better respond here because I'll tell you, that's a bad, bad, bad loss. We were wrong, Carver. Like, hey, I admit, I was on the Pelicans. This game, I lost.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
Donnie's losers, and that might sound a little bit harsh, but Donnie's losers from the 2024 NFL Draft, the entirety of the weekend, all 3 nights, rounds 1 through 7 that we saw in the Motor City. DRS, without further ado, who was your biggest loser of this 2024 NFL Draft?
It doesn't matter if you got great players in this draft. Sometimes it's where you select them. It's almost playing that poker game, and also how you can use it. You're supposed to get an impact player in round number 1, which 95% of the time is supposed to be a starter. If it's a top 10 pick, it better be a starter. The Atlanta Falcons are my biggest loser not because they drafted Michael Penix, the player himself. I think he's going to be a quality NFL player. I really do. But it's the fact of the matter is you invested in a quarterback that you already thought was your franchise guy for the next 4 to 5 years, and as Ben points out multiple times, and rightfully so. For a dumbbell GM to say, like, it would be so awesome if we drafted Penix and he never played because that's how good Kirk Cousins is. Did you watch Kirk Cousins the past couple of years? He's played really well. Minnesota didn't win anything with him at quarterback. So I don't know what he's talking about at this point here. And then you draft a guy that I think it's Rick Horrow is the name in round number 2 with the 3rd overall. Rook Haro. I mean, what a name that one is at this point. But I actually like the draft picks after Michael Penix. But the Penix pick was so bad that I can't even look past it at this point. It made no sense. And nobody in any talking head spot here on any television network, which includes this one here, should be telling you that was a good draft pick. It was the bozo pick of the draft, and it just happened to be top 10. Put it this way. Any draft party in Atlanta or around that area of Falcons fans, if they would have put a live camera on everybody, it should have been one of those things where your team loses the Super Bowl in a late field goal or guys are taking baseball bats and busting their TV. That's how bad of a draft pick it was for the Atlanta Falcons, Ben. That's really how bad it was. By the way, number 2, the Buffalo Bills. You already answered that question here, Ben. We'll keep it smart at this point. We needed more out of that draft for the Bills and didn't get it. And then we'll go right through to the Giants, which is where I wanted to focus here on a second. I love the wide receiver they drafted. But me being a wide receiver, you know what's never fun? Being wide open and can't get the football here. Nobody likes it as a wide receiver. That's what you're going to get on the Giants here because Daniel Jones is your starting quarterback. And if you're trying to hype up Daniel Jones to a wide receiver and say, hey, guy, I'm going to throw like 13 touchdown passes next year over 17 games. Man, you better be excited to get here. No wide receiver is excited by that. Neighbor should be excited he's actually in New York and should be excited about the next quarterback that's going to be on top of Daniel Jones, who will only be the Giants quarterback for one more season. The Giants should have picked the 6th pick overall. They should have went quarterback, Ben, not wide receiver. We're doing it backwards here in New York.
Completely agree. Listen, there's so many draft decisions that are made that could look fantastic in a year from now, and everything we have said could be idiotic. Keon Coleman could win Offensive Rookie of the Year for Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills, and we'll say what a pick it was shrewdly to move back to the 2nd round and not waste a first-round pick on it and accumulate draft value for years to come. You don't really know, but based on what we have heard and what we have seen, these are how we make these assessments. DRS, let's keep it rolling now for how these rookies project into the National Football League. It should be no surprise, of course, that the guy who was a minus 100,000 favorite to be the number 1 overall pick is the favorite to win Offensive Rookie of the Year. Of course, it's the quarterback in Chicago, Caleb Williams, who has answered every question, by the way, about expectation with why not have expectation? Let's make this thing work and do so quickly. And that is the expectation in Chicago. Win total is 8.5. They are favored to make the postseason at least slightly into minus money. And Donnie, I always caution people betting a quarterback to win Offensive Rookie of the Year. Yes, C.J. Stroud did so and ran away with the award this previous season in 2023. But only 4 quarterbacks in the last decade have won Offensive Rookie of the Year. Why? Because quarterback, fair or unfair, is tied to wins and losses. So even if a quarterback competes well, but the team that drafted him, because it was early and often in the NFL draft, does not have an overall high expectation for the following season. If you go 5-12 and even your quarterback showed some spots, you're probably not going to win this award or at least walk away with it. That's not the case, though, for the Bears. They are expected to be great. And if Chicago, or maybe not great, but at least above 500, if Chicago does have a winning record, there's a really good chance that Caleb Williams wins this award.
Yes, and that's why he's the prohibitive favorite here at a plus 210 price, and he should be. This isn't the normal circumstance of I'm rolling into a team that's like, okay, we're going to build around you over the next couple of years. They already built around him. Like, he has a ready-made, very good offense and ready to go, which he should be fine with. Harrison Jr. at 6-1 price, I agree with that, but also Xavier Worthy at a 16-1 price. Keep an eye out on him because you might get some of those 50 catches, 17.5 yards per catch, and 8 touchdowns. He'll be in the mix at 16-1, Ben.
Defensive Rookie of the Year, Dallas Turner, despite not being the first defensive player drafted, is the favorite. Now, we'll get ready for the NBA on this big Monday night. Up next.